for you. So it's not about voting every 4 years. We have elections that come around for your local government, and that's what really makes an impact in our schools and our community. So make sure you're doing that. Our last voice that we're going to hear from today is Mayor Higdon. We're so glad to have him here. And again, as she noted, he's another ally in this fight to try to fix some of these systemic issues that we're seeing and make sure our voices are heard. So Mayor Higdon.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here and speak with you today. I'd like to recognize Melissa and Stacy and all the other organizers. Fantastic job. It really came off without a hitch. It was very well planned. Good job. Yeah, this morning when I was getting dressed, I knew I didn't want to wear a suit because the last time we had a rally here, I had a wool suit on and I almost passed out while I was speaking. But I was very deliberate in the color choices that I chose today. And I really wanted to wear a black shirt and white pants, but my wife assured me that my disco era white pants no longer fit. I'm going to go off script just a bit, and I was watching CNN a few weeks ago, and Don Lemon, the newscaster, was talking about how we have two epidemics in the United States, the coronavirus and racism. And it's very easy for all of us to get very disheartened and depressed and even angry during these times. So I think it's good during these times to think back on times in our lives that gave us great joy. Today's Father's Day, so certainly for me, the days that my daughter and son were born, my son is here today, were some of the most joyous occasions of my life. Perhaps the day that I married my wife, Penny, was a very joyous event that I'll always remember. But I'm going to go off script and stay with me because I think this has relevance for what we're dealing with today. One of the most joyous days of my life occurred on April 4th, 1983. And I'll give you a hint as to what happened then or why it's important. I was a student then at North Carolina State University. And on April 4th, 1983, the much underrated Wolfpack beat the Houston Cougars for the National Basketball Championship. It was considered the greatest upset of all time. And people look at me and say, wow, you're really tall. Did you play on that team? And people that knew me back then know that my athletic prowess extends to being tall only, not having any other skills whatsoever. So no, I was not on the team. But I want to relate some of the things that happened that year. The Wolfpack was known as the Cardiac Pack because they kept coming back and winning over and over. They had to win the ACC tournament to even qualify for the NCAA tournament. And that meant they had to go through Muggsy Bogues led Wake Forest, Michael Jordan led North Carolina, Ralph Sampson led Virginia, and they beat all three of them and went to the NCAA tournament. Their first opponent was Pepperdine, and they were down by 5 points with way less than a minute left. And everybody thought their run was over. Their heads were hung. Coach Jim Valvano called a timeout. He had the team come over. And one of the players said, "I'm sorry, Coach." They were nearly ready to cry. They thought for sure that their run was over. Valvano called the play, and then he grabbed one of the players by his jersey and he said this: "Don't give up. Don't ever give up." Yes. Don't ever give up. And they went back, of course, and won that game. They won the next 4 in a row, including beating Virginia again. And they went up against Houston. And nobody in the country gave NC State any chance to win the game. They thought for sure that they were going to lose. You may remember the score was tied 52-52. North Carolina guard Derek Wittenberg shot up a prayer from half court, way off the mark, and the late great Lorenzo Charles sailed high above the basket and slammed it home for a 54-52 NC State win. And what makes that so memorable, and even people that are fans of that little school up in Chapel Hill or Durham, what makes it so memorable is what happened next, and that was that Jim Valvano ran around the court looking for someone to hug. Do you remember that? They play that clip every year at the NCAA tournament start. He nearly hugged one of the opposing players. About 10 years later, Jim Valvano had the misfortune of being diagnosed with cancer. He was almost dead, really. When he won the Arthur Ashe Courage Award, he was asked to speak at the ESPYs that year. He has a very moving speech that he gave that day. and he had to be helped up to the stage. He had cancer throughout his body, including his bones. He was a very sick man. And when he finished that all-important speech, he finished it with these words: "Don't give up. Don't ever give up." Right. And I think if Coach Valvano were with us today, that's what he would tell us in our fight against racism, that we can't give up, it's ongoing, and that we've got to keep fighting. I will tell you that there's some good news to proclaim today. I believe the unfortunate death, and I'll say murder, of George Floyd has awakened white America. Yes. We are awakened. We should have been awakened when the atrocities of slavery were known after the Civil War. We should have been awakened when thousands of black men and a few women were lynched all through the South. We should have been awakened when Emmett Till was tortured and murdered. We should have been awakened when Dr. King was assassinated. We should have been awakened when James Byrd Jr. was drugged behind a truck in Jasper, Texas. But for whatever reason, George Floyd has awakened us. And we are here to walk in march step with you as your allies. You see, racism is not a black problem or a brown problem or a white problem. It's an American problem and a global problem, and we all must work together to solve it. I do want to follow up with a few other notes about what our current steps toward change. I want to reiterate some of the things that Mayor Pro Tem Garner said. We are planning implicit bias training for all employees in the town, which is a big step. Several people today on the walk over asked me about the 8 Can't Wait protocols. I think most of you know that those are things like banning chokeholds and strangleholds, requiring de-escalation, require a warning before shooting, exhaust all other means before shooting, have a duty to intervene, right? Ban shooting into moving vehicles, require a use of force continuum, and require comprehensive reporting. I'm happy to say that Matthews is probably 95% the way there. There are a few items that we need to review, but we're very close to meeting you. I've also been asked to touch on what each of us can do as citizens of our town. I think number one, and I'm especially talking to my white friends, is don't be complicit in racism. I can recall, if I'm honest, as a young man, entering the workforce and having some white colleagues tell a racist joke while I stood by uncomfortably. Didn't say, hey, that's wrong, don't do that. That's not funny. That's hurtful. We have a duty to do that. We have a duty to speak up if you see something wrong. And we have a duty to educate ourselves, especially white America. I looked this morning at the New York Times bestseller list. Here are some of the books in the top 10. How to be an anti-racist. Me and white supremacy. So you want to talk about race. White fragility. I see a lot of people reading that one. And the color of law. And I recall reading an excellent book that came out almost 30 years ago called Race Matters by Dr. Cornel West, another good book. Another thing I want to talk about, some other speakers have mentioned, is we need to diversify our circles of friends. And I'm happy to say that Mount Moriah Missionary Baptist Church and the church I attend, Matthews United Methodist Church, have started a program where black and white people meet with one another, break bread together, drink coffee together, go to each other's houses, become friends. It's been a great success, and I would like to see that repeated all over. So what's next for Matthews? I think we have to remain proactive. Your current board is certainly always looking for opportunities for improvement. As Mayor Pro Tem Garner said, our emails and phone numbers are on the website. You can call me, email me anytime with any ideas you have. We do have a cultural diversity committee in town. And as Mayor Pro Tem Garner mentioned, we are considering doing a diversity audit so that we can make sure that our hiring and promotion practices are in line with the way we want to go today. Honk your horn if you believe Black Lives Matter. I want to close today by saying that I had the great honor of knowing Coach Jim Valvano. I served on a few committees with him, and I know he was a great believer in civil rights, and I know that if he were standing next to me here today, he would say, "Don't give up, don't ever give up," and he would conclude by saying, "Black Lives Matter." Pretty much all I have to say today. I appreciate you attending. I do know that Commissioner Whitley asked if he could say a word, if that's okay. Commissioner Whitley and I refer to each other as brothers from another mother. This is my brother, Larry Whitley.
Good evening, everyone. Black lives does matter in Matthew.